would like to discuss the power of no, the power of negation. A lot of times we put up with things just because we don't realize that we have the God or goddess given power to say no to it, to negate it. In magic, we oftentimes refer to this as banishing, and that is a very important part of all of it. But let's think of it more broadly today rather than just only in terms of magic. A lot of times what happens is in metaphysics in general, we hear about things like affirmations and about setting our intentions and things like that. But we don't oftentimes get taught that in order for those intentions to manifest, that we have to make room for them. And oftentimes we have things which automatically negate our intentions. We have thoughts, we have thought forms, we have habits, we have belief systems that sit and basically negate any concept of change for our good. For instance, if you knew that you needed a raise or some more income, you needed to get a raise of like 20% income or something like that to just to meet your expenses. Uh, y- it would be popular to talk about setting your intention for that and making vision boards for that or casting spells for that and doing things to bring that about. And oftentimes it's not discussed that the problem oftentimes will be is that those new thought forms that you're trying to install in your deep mind are rejected out of hand because they don't conform with some basic beliefs that you have. And so we have to learn how to say no to some of those deep beliefs so that we can create the things that we want in our lives. So, a lot of so-called evil in this world is really just things coming up from the depths of our consciousness to be released. And if we allowed these so-called evil things to come up so that we could look at them objectively and make new choices about whether we wanted to keep those thought forms or not, then we could see that a lot of what we call evil is actually good, is actually coming up to show us what we're thinking so that we could release it from ourselves. But instead, what we do is we believe that the thing itself is the problem, and we don't even understand that we have any hand in it. And so then we react to the thing itself, and then we make it even more real. And we allow ourselves to get enmeshed in the illusion of thinking that it's something that we have to fight against, when in reality, it's something that we have to negate. We have to actually negate. So when things come up, especially things that seem somewhat habitual or have a habitual nature to them, if we could get into the habit of first and foremost when it comes up is just saying, no. No, I don't accept this. I don't accept this for myself. I don't accept this reaction. I don't accept this circumstance. I don't accept this condition. I don't accept whatever it is. Just actually being courageous and saying no. No. I have the divine power of no. We have to remind ourselves that no is a complete sentence. You can say no. You can say no to anybody or anything without feeling guilty or bad. Somebody wants to monopolize your time, you can say no. Now, you can be kind and say, no, thank you. You can be kind and say, no, I can't do that today. Maybe we can get together another time. But it's really up to you when it's time to say no to people and conditions and things. And the power of no is something that we grow up not even understanding is ours. And by the time we get to the point where we use the power of no, oftentimes we are overusing it. We come to from the point of view of like there's no other choice. And so I have to say no and therefore make it a big drama and a big scene and maybe even lose friendships and relationships and things over it. Just because I wasn't feeling comfortable saying no as I went along. And the same thing goes with saying no to circumstances. But usually by the time we think that no, I can't take this anymore, it's gotten so out of hand that it takes a lot more than a simple gesture. It takes a lot of deep work. So if we can get used to, as things come along, learning how to when something is not as we want it, that we have the right to say no. We have the right to say, no, I don't accept this. I do not want this. I do not want this in my life. And from there, once you've said no to something, you then need to release it. You then need to release it. So you first recognize, I do not want this. No, I do not want this. And then you need to release it. And when, in order to release something, you must become indifferent to it. In order for something to be released, you must become indifferent to it. So when you say no to something, you learn how to say no to it casually. You learn how to say no to it and let go of the emotion. Let go of the emotional attachment to it, because the more emotion that you bring that, the more you're keeping it alive and the more entrenched you are with it. In order to really let go of something, you need to pull out of the emotional involvement with it. So if you're saying no to a specific circumstance, that brings that up for you, and you say no to it, and it charges it oftentimes with a moment of emotion, like, oh, I hate this thing. Well, you got to get beyond the I hate this thing and become indifferent to it. Become to where it's simply just taking out the trash. Now, this is a place where a lot of people really make mistakes when they banish things, and I try to caution you about banishing like this. People turn their banishings into big deals where they just get so upset with the thing and they rip it up, or they burn it, or they go throw it in a lake. Never again will you come back to rah, rah, rah. And they get very upset with it, and they don't realize that what they're doing is they're creating it. Because that's what magic is. When you focus on something intently with a lot of emotion, you are creating it. So you can call it a banishment until hell freezes over, and it's still, you're creating more of it when you do that. And so you've got to learn how, when you're banishing something, you don't do anything more than taking out the trash. It's just something that you used to have that you no longer have, and you're letting it go. And it's very indifferent, and it's very casual, and it's no longer there. So I'm just letting it go. I'm releasing this. I'm releasing this from my life. You can release things very casually. Now, if you're doing, a major magical operation, you still need to have that attitude of indifference when you're banishing something. But if you're just doing something casually, if you're just casually letting go of something, you've said, no, I do not want this. And then you find a way or a method of letting it go. Sometimes just writing it down on a piece of paper, ripping it up and throwing it in the trash is all the symbolism that you need. Sometimes you can use something like a household magic. We've talked about this before, where a great way to do this is, let's say you've made dinner. And you've kept something in the oven, and the casserole dish is just caked on. After dinner, you put that to soak, and you tell yourself, as I'm cleaning this dish, so is this condition being released from me. And then as and then when the soaking is done and you can clean that all off, you just clean it up, wash it out, dry it, and put it away, and say, so mote it be. And it's just that simple. You've let go of this condition through an act of cleansing a dish or a casserole or something like that. You could do that every time you took out the trash. As I'm taking out this trash, so am I taking out blah, blah, blah. So am I throwing away da, da, da. Very casually. You wouldn't go through your trash piece by piece and get really upset about every single thing you're throwing away, would you? Well, that's what we do with when we're doing our so-called banishings, when we're letting go of things, when we're releasing things. We really get into them, and we make them into a big deal, and that does nothing but perpetuate them. So as we are letting go of our our patterns and our tendencies and our conditions and our circumstances, negative emotions, whatever it is that you're saying no to, as you're letting go of it, learn how to have divine indifference about it. Another thing that you can use is just the symbol of an X or a cross, an equal arm cross, not a Christian cross, to cross something out in your mind. You can just either mentally do it, mentally put, as you're saying no, you can exit out, or with your finger, you can say no as you exit out. And you just, and then you release it. No, I do not want this. I release this I release myself from this completely. I let this go completely. And you just let it go. And like I said, then go take something out of go throw something away in the trash and say, as I throw this away, so am I throwing this other thing away. Uh, so that little symbol of an X, or that little symbol of a cross, is very, very powerful, and it has a lot of akashic energy with it. It's been used for centuries to let go of things and to X out things. You're crossing out, or you're Xing out things from your life. And you have to keep reminding yourself when you do this that this is your right. You have the right to say yes or no to things. I think Jesus said something about that in the New Testament. I'm not a very good Bible scholar, but he said something like that. The prayer is yes, yes, no, no. That's what that means. It's just like, I want this, I don't want this. I'm willing to have this, I'm not willing to have that. And we don't realize that we have the right to say no, and that we have to let go, and that we're allowed to let go. Now, when you let go, it's really good to remember that wonderful phrase that is used in the 12 steps, but it's older than that, and that's letting go and letting God. And you don't have to call it God. You can call it your higher power, whatever is best for you. And that can change according to circumstances too. But letting go and letting a higher power take over, that's very, very important, because as you release something, you don't want to release something and say, well, now I know what I'm going to do. Now I know what's good for me. Now I know what I want. Because if you knew what was so good for you, you wouldn't have to be Xing it out of your life, right? So rather than thinking, oh, I'm smart enough to be able to make my own decisions all by myself, recognize, no. Now that I'm letting this go, I'm releasing this pain, I'm releasing this negativity, I'm releasing this condition. I'm going to let God replace this with something even better. Yes, it's okay to have a goal. You can say, in place of this, I'd like, whatever. I'd like this 20% increase in my income, or I'd like this new Honda Civic, or I'd like this, or I'd like that. It's fine, and you can do spells to fill up the vacuum that you're creating. But remind yourself constantly, this or something better. According to my highest good, I want a higher wisdom to fill this vacuum up for me, because I want to be happy. I want to be happy. Another thing where people sometimes can get even more bang for their buck when we're releasing things and letting things go is when you have things in your past that you feel guilty about. When you have problems in your past that you feel like you've really wronged yourself, or wronged someone else, or wronged the world in some way, if you don't handle that, then those things act as a battery for creating more and more problems for you. So if you're not honing in on the thing that you're feeling guilty about, then you're constantly having to use your power of no on all kinds of little manifestations that come up as a result of the fact that you haven't handled that guilt. So rather than going no, 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 and you having all these recurring problems that you're always having to banish, if you can get down to the root of it and realize, oh, I haven't resolved the fact that I did this. I really messed this up. I really did a horrible thing, or I think it was a horrible thing, or I still feel really bad about that, or really embarrassed about that, or whatever it is. And this is like churning out results for me. Well, that's when it's a good idea to use that power of confession. The power of confession. The reason why they say confession is good for the soul is because it's a method of release. It's simply a method of release. Once you can confess it and tell somebody about it, it no longer has power over you. And we've talked about the power of secrecy many, many times. The more you can keep something secret, the more power you give it. Well, the problem is that we tend to keep the wrong kinds of things secret. We only want sacred secrets. We only want wonderful secrets. We want secrets about our magic and our goals and all of the things that are wonderful for us. Those things we can keep private. But when we keep private, these guilts and these remorses and these shame-based secrets, when we keep those shame-based secrets, sacred and hold them dear, then we are putting ourselves into a position where we can't help but have manifestation after manifestation after manifestation of problems. And those problems are going to keep coming until you get rid of that thought form. And the best way to do that is to confess. Now, if you have a friend that you can trust, fine. Because you don't want to tell everybody. You don't want to tell everybody. You want to tell one person. You can tell a friend. You can tell a therapist. You can tell a spiritual advisor. And then if none of that seems to work, you can just write it out. You can write it out and confess it straight to your guide or straight to God or straight to the goddess or whatever your sense of a higher power is. Write it out. Be really clear about what it is and that you don't want to keep it anymore, that you want to be forgiven. You want to have release. And then what you do, once you write that out, then you find, who have I not forgiven? And to the degree that I want to be released from this, to that degree, I am willing to forgive this person and release them. And through that act of forgiving another, while you are clear about the thing that you want to be forgiven, you can rip up that piece of paper and throw it away with indifference, knowing that, of course, God forgives you. Never held anything against you. Infinite intelligence never held that against you, but you've been holding it against yourself. So by confessing it, you're taking the charge off of it and you're letting it go, so it no longer can wreak havoc on your life anymore. And it's through the act of forgiving someone else that we can forgive ourselves. If you're not willing to forgive another person, there's no way to forgive yourself. And that's why the Lord's Prayer is worded that way. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, or forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Or the way we say it in the craft, forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors. We always put it in the past tense because it's more powerful that way. So you have all the power to release yourself from anything that you feel like is something that you feel bad about in your past that you've done. You're not bound to your past. You're not bound to your past mistakes. You can release yourself at any moment by simply confessing it and forgiving another person. And by just like when you're scouring that casserole and saying, as I let go of this, so am I letting go of this problem. You're saying, as I forgive this person, so am I forgiven. And that is an act of self-forgiveness. So when you are willing to let go of your own self-recrimination based on the things that you've done in the past, there's going to be a lot less of a need for you to use your power of no. Now, sometimes you've harmed other people and they hold resentments against you. Sometimes you haven't harmed people and they hold resentments against you. Sometimes people just don't like you, or sometimes people have it in their mind that you did something that you didn't do. And that can definitely have an effect on you, how people think of you. So you don't need to micromanage how people think of you. In fact, it's good to remind yourself that how people think of me is none of my business, or what people think of me is none of my business. But at the same time, if you get a sense that people are resenting you and not releasing you, you can release yourself from them. Because ultimately, everybody wants to be released. Everybody wants to be forgiven. And you can just say, I now release myself from this situation. And you can even say, without worrying about free will, you can say, you now release me from this. You now forgive me for this. Because on some level, they want to forgive you. Now, if they're not ready to forgive you, you won't be able to have power over that. But you will, by doing that, release yourself from it. And then after that, it's really none of your business if they forgive you or they don't forgive you. That's just up to them. But it will not have any power over you. Now, as you forgive others and as you forgive yourself and as you allow yourself to be released and as you say no, no, no to the things that you no longer want, you start to be able to realize your dreams. You start to be able to realize your happiness and your joy. And we talk about happily ever after, in these fairy tales. They lived happily ever after. Does that mean they never had a problem? Does that mean they never had a fight? Does that mean that that they never got sick or no. Happily ever after means that they were capable of moving from event to event to event to event in such a way that they stayed present in the moment, that they were present in the moment, and they were able to live their lives without fear, and they were able to live their lives without holding on to resentment and without holding on to unforgiveness. And when problems came up, they were able to say no to them. And that's how we live happily ever after, is by taking life as it comes and saying no when we mean it, and yes when we mean it. And if there's anything that is going on in our lives, we have the right to say, no, I do not accept this. I do not want this. And I am going to now release myself from this. And I'm going to do whatever I need to do in order to make this happen. And I'm going to be guided and led from on high. I have an internal teacher that has been with me since the beginning of my existence and will be here for all eternity to help me. And so anytime I'm confronted with something that is not good for me, I have the right to say, no, I do not want that. Now, then the teacher will be able to say, well, sometimes we think that we don't want that thing, but we don't really understand what it is. So by saying no to it, what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to maybe see it from a different perspective and realize, oh, that's not really what I thought it was. Okay, this is all right then. But if you hadn't said no to it, you would just still be upset with the illusion of what you thought it was. So even if it ends up not being a problem, you still did a good thing by saying no to it. Now, by saying no to something, you're not resisting it. You're not fighting with it. You're not getting into a battle with it. You're just calmly saying, no, we don't want this. And now after I say no, then my next thing is to release it. And I have to remind myself that in order to release this, I have to become indifferent to it. I have to become indifferent to it and realize in order for me to throw this thing out, it cannot be causing me emotional reactions. And the more emotion that I have with this, the more I'm creating it and the more I'm tying myself to it. So I have to find an understanding of what this is on the level where it doesn't affect me anymore. And that's sometimes where we need the help from our inner guidance and from a higher power. But we do have every right to cleanse ourselves from the emotion of anything that we do not want. We have the right to throw those things away, to release ourselves from those things, and so that we can then start to create the things that we do want, and that we can start having the life that we want to have. But part of having the life we want to have is saying no to the things that aren't working for us, and that you have every right to say no to circumstances, to people, to situations, to requests, to demands. You have the right. Sometimes you can't say no to certain things. You can't just say the IRS says you owe blah, 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 blah. Well, you can't just say, no, I'm not going to pay that. That's not the way that we use the power of no. But we can say no to the financial crisis that we perceive. Because the IRS comes and tells you, no, you owe another $6,000. You don't necessarily get to say, no, I'm not going to pay that. But you get to say, no, I am not going to have this financial crisis, right? Do you see the difference? So by saying no to the financial crisis, then you can either you're open to having it resolved however it does. Either the IRS is going to say, "Oh yeah," when you refile, they're going to say, "Yes, that was a mistake," or you're going to find a way to bring that money into your life, and it's not going to be a problem. You're going to just pay the taxes, and all is going to be well. But it's because you said no to the crisis, not necessarily to the circumstance, but to the crisis itself. So that's an important distinction as well. Remember that the point of all of using your power of no is simply to bring harmony and to bring healing and to bring prosperity and to bring joy into your life. That's the reason for it. It's not to create conflict. It's to actually dispel the conflict. It's to neutralize. The power of no is there to neutralize any conflict that you might be experiencing. And remember that all kinds of banishings, whether they are with problems or with circumstances or with things that no longer serve us, anytime we let go of something and release it, it creates a vacuum. And when you create a vacuum, it will be filled. So that's why it's so important that we forgive ourselves for the past, because we don't want it to be just filled again with that machine in our deep mind that keeps saying, okay, let's churn out another problem. Let's churn out another problem. I feel so guilty. I need to be punished. That's why it's so important to forgive ourselves for the past, because then those little machines are gone. And then when we create a vacuum, we can have those vacuums filled by spirit rather than by those old thought forms. And when spirit fills a vacuum, spirit already knows what's going to make you happy. Spirit already knows what you need. Spirit already knows the great career for you, and the money for you, and the mate for you, and the home for you, and the car for you, and the health for you, and the appearance for you, and the clothes for you, and all those other things that you want. All those other things that you want. And of course you can co-create with spirit. You can come up with your own ideas of what you think would be nice. Absolutely. But just saying that when spirit fills the vacuum, all is well. When the ego fills the vacuum, it's just another problem. So you don't want to just create a vacuum and that's it, because when you just create a vacuum, you're just going to fill it back up with the same old stuff. You want to create the vacuum by forgiving yourself also of the past and any guilt that you've had, so that you're no longer recreating on those levels. So there's always a time and a place for forgiveness. And especially in this world. In this world, there's just so much resentment. There's so much discontentment in this world. There's always room for some more forgiveness. And you can't overdo it. You can't over-forgive yourself or over-forgive others. All that's going to do is continue to create thought forms that fill up your life with joy and fill up your life with prosperity. So as you say no to certain circumstances and you release them and you create a vacuum, also you want to remind yourself to keep your spiritual hygiene as heightened as possible. And part of that spiritual hygiene is letting go of guilt and letting go of remorse and letting go of blaming yourself for things that you've done in the past. You've learned your lesson. You made a mistake. You're not going to repeat that mistake, and the punishment is over. And that's it. And you just have to get there. And remember, you get there by forgiving. That you forgiving others is how you forgive yourself. Somebody had asked me about this about a few weeks ago, about how to cleanse themselves from these problems and how to cleanse themselves from these reoccurring problems. And you just remind yourself that just like you don't just take a shower once, you don't clean your house once, you don't brush your teeth once, you don't go to the gym once, you don't say no once, you don't purify yourself once, you don't negate that which is not good for you once. You don't forgive once. You don't cleanse once. It's a constant self-renewing process, and it's a beautiful process, and it's one that you want to just keep doing for as long as you're on this earth. keep renewing yourself, and you'll notice that you keep growing and growing, brighter and brighter and brighter, and things continue to get better and better and better. Does that mean that you don't ever have problems again? No, probably not. But you'll be able to handle those problems as they come up, because now you have the power of no at your disposal. You have the power of release at your disposal, and you have the power of forgiveness at your disposal. And those three things, when used together, are extremely potent at overcoming any problem. Thank you so much for spending some time today with me. I really appreciate you. And I will see you again very soon. Until next time, blessed be.